Hello and welcome to the lesson on audience for the Set Text Humans part of the Component 2 exam. This lesson will cover a few things regarding how an audience of humans are constructed and targeted, obviously looking at demographics, psychographics, appeals, that sort of thing. And then we're going to evaluate the appeals of humans as well as how audiences would respond or have responded to the show. First of all, very simple question. Who is the target audience for humans? Let's have a look at the trailer. And you've got a couple of posters there from both the UK and the US, which were part of the marketing.
Your brand new synthetic standard domestic profile installed. This is the best thing you will do for your family.
Hello, Joe.
We don't need one.
The health service hasn't ordered 500,000 of them for fun.
I'm happy with the one I've got.
We'll make a new home somewhere.
There is no home for us.
There will be, I promise.
People have a right to know if their products are going to start strangling them.
What the hell are you?
You brought it into the house and we don't know anything about it.
It's a machine.
In the future, when technology surpasses us, we become inferior.
Humans, brand new drama, coming soon to 4.
Okay, so when you're considering how the audience is being targeted or who's being targeted, there are a number of different factors you might look at based on the trailer as well as the posters. The genre of the show obviously is important for winning an audience. The storyline, which of course includes the themes and the character representations. There is a certain element of star recognition for this show that might have captured a few different audiences or different audience members. And of course the traditional things you'd expect from a dramatic trailer, things like enigma codes and the action that takes place within the trailer. And of course this final aspect of intertextuality, which can link neatly to genre, I guess, because there are a few recognisable references to different film and other science fiction texts in there as well. And that leads us on to the next question of how is the marketing materials actually targeting the audience that they're trying to win? What are the most prominent techniques used to try and gain the interest of the audience? Once you've decided on a primary audience, a follow-up question really, are there other audiences? Are there secondary or what we would maybe call a tertiary audience for the show? So let's have a look at some of the obvious ones. The primary audience here are fans of TV drama. Obviously the trailer itself is very dramatic, plenty of, as we said, enigma and action codes going on here. The music really helps in building up the kind of drama, and what we're talking about here are people who are maybe from a mainstream audience, watching Channel 4 in the UK or AMC overseas. This has got a post-watershed spot, so audiences who are probably more than 15 years old. And there's a sort of cross-gender and age appeal. Audiences might identify with some of the characters that could be seen as relatable, possibly even role models. Others may have charisma or be considered to be attractive. It's kind of a very typical high-budget TV show with pretty people and lots of things going on, lots of thrills, lots of action, and lots of ways of capturing the interest of an audience. We might consider a secondary audience as the fans of science fiction. There are lots of hybrid generic elements in the text. There is a kind of maybe slightly more alternative or niche audience that are targeted of young males here. The alternative audience might be won over because of the sort of non-linear elements of the story, the fact that its narrative isn't as straightforward or linear as some TV dramas. There are plenty of enigmas, questions littered throughout the show. And of course there is the experience of enjoying tension of a sci-fi thriller as well. Now, it's not inconceivable to say that there is a tertiary audience here, or tertiary audiences, one of which might be the box set viewer. The binge-watching TV is something that seems to have come hand in hand with a streaming Netflix era, shall we say. The marketing and publicity has to be good, but if it's for a genre they may not usually watch, or certainly if it's the next big show to binge, then perhaps it's on people's watch lists. Certainly the 4 on-demand or all 4 streaming services, one of the biggest in the UK. So quite easily this could be essential viewing for a binge TV watcher. And not just this audience, maybe there are a few other inherited fan bases as well. Word of mouth, or people who watched the original series of Real Humans. Perhaps people who may have watched it on AMC because they were fans of other AMC productions such as The Walking Dead or the hugely popular Breaking Bad. The British production company involved in this show, Kudos, produced shows like Life on Mars and Broadchurch, and whilst those are both crime TV dramas, Life on Mars certainly had certain sort of science fiction or kind of maybe slightly more surreal aspects to it. And then you've got other audiences coming from some of the stars of the show: Will Tudor, Colin Morgan for maybe the younger audience, William Hurt for a maybe more movie literate audience as well. But find some evidence. What would you use from the TV show itself and any of the marketing you found so far to support the evidence that to find evidence to support those first 2 target audiences, the primary and secondary? One of the really interesting things about Humans, possibly even more interesting than the show, is the innovative marketing that was used to try and capture perhaps that more alternative or a slightly maybe more media savvy audience. In a smart piece of marketing, Channel 4 and AMC produced an alternative marketing campaign that established a company, and not real, it has to be said company, but gave it all the texture of a real company, called Persona Synthetics. And this was originally in keeping with the kind of alternative reality setting of the TV series. This is almost could be adverts that occurred in that alternative reality. Anyway, I won't say much more. Watch the advert. How does it cleverly use the conventions of advertising to market the show, but also, advertising to market the Persona Synthetics products, but also how does maybe this reinforce some of the themes that are explored in the show?
Meet Sally.
Hello, what can I do for you today?
She is your new best friend. The help you've always wanted. She is perfect in every way. She can do just about anything. She is faster, stronger, more capable than ever before. She can be just about anyone. Sally is part of your family. A teacher. A helper. A carer. A friend. She is whatever you want her to be. New generation Persona Synthetics, closer to humans than ever before. Humans, coming June on 4.
In a fantastically creative bit of marketing, obviously the advert is for a non-existent product, but at the same time it's a trailer. So looking at how this uses both those conventions is really interesting. Obviously, the advert itself has that kind of soft, plinky, plonky piano music that makes people quite sedate and makes the product seem really relatively harmless. Just as if you were just demonstrating a car advert, we get to see all the functions of a Persona Synthetic device. We see it in a pristine setting with the stereotypical family of the mum, dad and 2 kids. Everything's sort of very gentle. There are a couple of sort of little whizzy techniques like the special, this fast motion and so on in this. But by and large, if you were to compare this to maybe a family car advert, you'd find that there are a crazy amount of similarities in what it's done, right down to the kind of very calming voiceover to be reassuring about your purchase and that you were getting value for money. So yeah, very bog standard domestic appliance or car advert style here. But of course the advert itself completely reinforces a lot of the themes of Humans as a show. The idea of the synths as little more than domestic slaves is emphasised as we see the synth carrying tons of bin bags across the garden. The idea that maybe the show itself is about gender in some kind of way. The synth depicted is incredibly feminine looking, or fits a very archetypal template of femininity, and carries out very domestic chores, is in fact completely confined by the realm of the domestic, so exploring those themes and ideas. But some of the more subtle ones are also explored, the idea that maybe technology is taking over our lives and that it's replacing us in some way. I love the shot of the mother who is too engrossed in her own technology, her phone, to address the fact that her child is not sleeping well, and just looks at the synth to take care of that, to become the parent for her, while she re-engages with her mobile phone, the technology. So again, exploring ideas of, are we doing this to ourselves in many ways? And of course, aside from the slave labour or the rights of robots kind of themes that Humans addresses, we have that shot of this husband closing the bedroom door, suggesting that the synths can be used for pleasure as well as practical activities as well. So again, addressing so many of the themes of the show, but at the same time dressing it up as if it's an advert for a real world product. And in fact, to add to this immersive real world feel of the campaign, there was even a Twitter feed that was set up by angry citizens over the impact that the synths would have. The We Are People campaign addresses again some of the issues that are addressed in the show, particularly from Matt's character, who fears that synths are somehow going to replace all the jobs that young people should be doing, that will render a lot of people in society disenfranchised. And it's, again, made out to be a real campaign on a real social media platform. So go online and have a look at some of the different types of marketing that they did. Some of the traditional stuff, but also some of this more immersive advertising. It really was quite clever and an interesting way of engaging audiences and encouraging them to participate, which of course we'll be discussing more later. Whilst you're making notes on that, make sure it's clear which of the 4 target audiences this more immersive marketing is for. Of course, as we shift from marketing into appeals, this immersive nature of marketing and this references to not only other text, but a blurring of lines between the world of the text and our real world should really remind you of Jean Baudrillard and the idea of the simulation, simulacra, and of course the hyperreal as well. Whilst he is considered by the exam board as a media language theory, I don't think there's really too much problem with applying and addressing Baudrillard here. I think it's quite clear that one of the, if you like, the characteristics of that immersive marketing campaign is that it adopts a hyperreal representation, and it encourages audiences to sort of engage with the text on a different level, or to more sort of conventional text, shall we say. So let's move on to the appeals of the show itself. Obviously, the word appeals can also be replaced by the word pleasures, is a term sometimes used in media and cultural studies and film studies. It's similar to that notion of a product bringing gratification. So let's have a think about some of the pleasures that audiences may gain from Humans. A little hint, consider all the different elements that we've studied so far on this show when we looked at media language and representations as well. Well, I'm sure you've got a whole bunch of ones here. We talked about genre, so you'd have expectations of the genre fulfilled. We know the show has got a slightly unconventional narrative, which often requires intellectual puzzles to be solved, particularly in the form of enigma codes. The representations of realism are fascinating here. It is set in an alternative reality to our own, but touches with things that we recognise, we can identify with. Of course, the show is, designed to be entertaining. Some bits of it are very dramatic. Some of it, bits of it, use a quite sort of dry sense of humour. Some of the humour is a bit more on the nose. As we mentioned before, there is a star appeal to some of the characters. I would call these kind of character actors. Some of these are recognisable from mainstream BBC One shows, others from maybe slightly more art house film world and so on and so forth. Don't underestimate the power of some of the themes of this show and some of the messages it has, the moral messages. This is a subject which contextually people are thinking about, so I think that discussing the nature of AI and how we treat it, discussing whether or not we're letting computers do too many jobs for us, discussing the role that artificial intelligence has in our life and the safety of that, are all things that people are discussing, and so this show tackles some of those head on. This is a show which has, small moments of resolution and catharsis when each of its sort of storylines is closed off, but often keeps quite a few of them open at any one time. Our narrative expectations are fulfilled and challenged probably equally by this show. And then there is a sort of voyeuristic appeal of looking into the lives of others, which kind of takes us full circle to look at genre. At the end of the day, this show is not just science fiction. We all agreed that this show has got elements of the soap opera about it. And of course, one of the appeals of soap opera is that kind of wandering into other people's lives. So now you've got the list of appeals. Can you refer specific bullet points here on the left to specific audiences? If we've managed to identify 4 audiences, which of the appeals applies to which of the audiences? So I mentioned that that an appeal can also be described as a pleasure, and so or a gratification, which is where we can apply uses and gratifications. Now, asking which of the uses and gratifications can we apply when discussing the show feels like an obvious appeals question. But of course, the uses and gratifications model was based on the premise that that audiences decide how and what they're going to use the media for. It's not just a passive consumption of a media product. And therefore, even though it was designed and really thought up in the sort of mid-70s, the uses and gratifications model is really a model which concerns audience responses. Our response is to use a media product, so it's not, it considers the audience as a bit more active as agents in their consumption. Anyway, more on that later. First of all, how can we apply the idea of personal identification to the show Humans? Well, modern audiences would identify with the characters as that different world is so similar to our own, mirroring our own fears and concerns. And this is obviously helped by the surface realism, or what we call verisimilitude within the text. This is quite a show that's quite recognisably England. There are universal themes that we would see appear in lots of dramatic media and art: love, loss, betrayal. All of these are explored, and of course, not only those sort of grand themes, but also the domestic, the familiar. That family drama strikes a chord with a range of audiences. And what about entertainment? Well, of course, the audiences may use the text for escapism. There are elements of fantasy and the surreal in the text, which divert us from our own mundane existences. If we recognise our own lives being played out in front of us, then the added dilemma of lifelike, possibly malfunctioning synthetic life forms obviously adds a bit of drama into the mix. Of course, there are other aspects of entertainment here. The non-linear narrative keeps us active and guessing and working out what's going on. Anita's flashbacks kind of help us work these things out, but they're sort of interesting and engaging to watch. And of course, we want to see how the relationships themselves develop. The drama and relationships was always based on conflict, and we find that engaging. Whereas some of the storylines are a bit more action-based and gives this the feel of perhaps a slightly kind of more action-orientated science fiction show. So think about social interaction. Make some notes on this from the marketing campaigns that you've researched. And also have a think about how audiences will respond to the different narrative devices. What are the Enigma codes and other structural narrative devices that we used? What are the appeal of these? Why might these gratify the audiences? And as always, are some of these uses and gratifications more applicable to certain audiences than others? It's wrong for us to suggest that all of the uses and gratifications reach all of the audiences. Some of them will be utilised by different audiences in different ways. Now, as I said, the uses and gratifications model is a great way to link appeals to reception theory and the work of Stuart Hall. As we know, this model, as Hall defined it, is the idea that communication is a process where the meaning is encoded by the producers of a text and it's decoded by audiences. However, decodings do not necessarily lead from encodings, and so the audience can take three different positions: the dominant reading, or the hegemonic reading, or the preferred reading, where the audience take what was intended, fully understand it and accept it. The negotiated position, where the encoder's message is adapted or negotiated to better fit the encoder's individual experiences. In other words, they may agree with some, but not all of the ideological message, or they may even misunderstand and use the text for their own purposes. And then the oppositional reading, where the encoder's ideologies and messages are fully understood, but the decoder disagrees with it, reads it in a different way. So a few questions to obviously answer with that. I'd like you to consider, using this as an opportunity to practice a few prose writing skills and to write a perfect paragraph for each of the following questions. What would you describe as the preferred reading of humans? So go back to your media language notes if necessary. Look at some of the themes and ideas. Maybe look at some of the notes you made on representations also. What is the preferred meaning of humans? Then add to that some evidence. How is this encoded? In other words, what is done to encourage people to take that preferred reading? And then third and finally, what other readings might this text generate? So can you envisage a negotiated reading for this show? So whereby someone maybe is watching it for a different reason than to perhaps accept or understand all of the ideologies. And perhaps could you look at reasons why people might take an oppositional reading, why people would understand what the show is attempting to do, but perhaps reject some of the messages and ideas that the show is espousing. So, of course, we look at responses and don't just consider the response of individual audience members, but also how responses can basically pave the way to analyse the success of a show like Humans. One way in which we can measure the success of a TV show is through its critical reviews. So I've got a review here from the San Francisco Chronicle. Have a read of it. Decide what reading has been taken. What evidence is there from that review? So make sure you're not just claiming whether it's preferred, oppositional or negotiated. Provide the evidence to prove it. And just finally, in your own opinion, are the points that are made valid? What do you see as what do you think about this particular reading of the show? Do you agree with the reviewer or do you disagree with them? And whilst we're on success, we might as well have a look at some of the other facts and figures that can be used to help us measure success of a TV show. The score on IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, is 8.1 from over 25,000 reviews. That's an incredibly positive showing for a TV show. The Series 1 viewing figures averaged 3.44 million on Sunday nights, which, if you include the Plus One channel, went to more than 4 million, which these days is a really decent amount of people watching terrestrial TV. The first episode actually attracted 6 million, which is Channel 4's biggest drama audience in 20 years. And the show was nominated for awards as well. It wasn't just commercially successful. It was nominated for 4 BAFTAs and a number of other awards that you'll be able to find online. But if we start to think about the reception theory a bit more from an audience's perspective and less from maybe a critical perspective, we go back to Henry Jenkins, whose ideas of participatory culture we only really sort of touch upon in component 1 and are much more interesting as we look into component 2. Now, Henry Jenkins was interested in the notion of fandom, and he saw that fans were active participants in constructing and circulating the meanings of texts. And in fact, I think the 3 paragraphs or bullet points here are kind of ramped up so that we kind of understand a level of fandom which increases. So if we were to understand that fans initially are active participants in the construction and circulation of textual meanings, we might think of that as being fans understanding and basically decoding the text in a way that they understand. The second bullet point, the idea that fans appropriate texts and read them in ways that are not fully authorised by the media producers, is a kind of negotiated reading, or what Jenkins describes as textual poaching. And that happens quite a lot now, and it's sort of, I think the idea of the media text has become less sacred as audiences have become more and more active, so that actually people feel entirely justified in reading a text in a way that suits them that might not be anywhere near the encoded reading. And then his third point is really that fans don't only construct their own meanings in text, but actually construct their own social and cultural identities through borrowing and inflecting mass culture images. They are part of this participatory culture, and their consumption of the media has a vital social dimension. The media is now no longer just something we use perhaps to gratify us or as a hobby or a pleasure. It can be there to inform every aspect of our lives. So let's see if we can see some of these 3 elements play themselves out. Now, there are plenty of examples of how much this show has captured the imaginations of a dedicated fan base. And I'm just going to play a video here on screen. This is a screenshot that of myself just having a look at some of the different aspects of fandom that you can see online, starting with a Humans wiki site itself. These are really well maintained and thorough. They give synopses of episodes, character descriptions, discussions of both the textual and metatextual issues that surround the production of the show. So if you are a fan, you'll be able to find as much information as you could ever possibly want to from this Humans wiki site, whether that's looking at different videos or selecting kind of random pages to kind of learn about the show. For a series that only ran for 3 seasons, it's quite impressive that there is so much out there that is collectible, if you like, that people enjoy. And then, of course, you've got the devotion of some fans to create their own fan fiction sites. These allow fans to create their own narratives, which use characters from within the show. This is not a unique thing online. It's becoming increasingly popular for all kinds of different media products, that fans will write their own fiction, their own stories, use the characters in that world and share these stories. And it's a proper online community of people within a specific fan set, in this case, the TV show Humans. These are well worth having a look at and having a read. Some of them take the storylines and run with those. Others disappear into completely brand new narratives. Really fascinating, what we might call a subculture. And of course, you've got more traditional fan pages on social media, and including some people who have adopted the role of characters from the actual show itself, almost kind of proclaiming to be those characters. So I would definitely say spend some time looking at the different examples of fandom there are out there, and particularly with that, working through Jenkins, those three different, if you like, layers or levels of fandom that he seems to describe in the show as well. Finally, I suppose a crossover between the fandom response, or the kind of commercial response and critical response, of course, reviews. And these days, more and more review shows pop up online. People record their own vlogs reviewing films and TV shows. I'm just going to show you a review of Series 1 from an American broadcast or online review show called What the Flick, and just want you to make some notes of the reading that's taken and the different appeals that I mentioned as well.
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick. Alonzo, Kim, taking a look at Season 1 of Humans on AMC, the pilot episode.
I love this.
You love this, yeah, so tell me about that.
Well, maybe this is more my genre, how Sense8 would be something that you feel really attached to. I feel really attached to the AI, singularity genre. What is human? Questioning our own humanity when forced to look into how we treat robots, or androids rather, which is, we treat them as less than, we treat them as servants. And then also there's that fear of, am I being supplanted? Am I obsolete? Am I going to be left behind? And I love that it forces you to look at your own humanity.
It definitely does bring all that stuff up, I grant you. And I hope that as the show proceeds, that it feels less like other shows and movies I have seen that bring up those same issues.
It does feel familiar.
A little bit. Although I will say the idea of the fact that there's this sort of renegade pack of them that have some level of sentience, and that one of them kidnaps a human child at the end. It's like, okay, that's new.
I like it.
I'm digging that. It's very British. I think the way that the people respond and the idea of having these people, these robot servants, these android servants in their house, synths. I think you would get it. There would be a slightly different take on it if it were an American show, just in terms of what the conversations would be like and what the behavior around.
No, it was quite British.
Yes.
I enjoyed it though. I think it may be possible that I'm influenced by the fact that Catherine Parkinson, who played Jen Barber in my favorite show, The IT Crowd, is in it, and there's a synth music, and it reminds me of this show that I love.
Is she the mom?
The mom is Jen.
Oh
from
wow,
the IT
I didn't
Crowd.
recognize her. Oh cool. Okay.
I immediately recognized her.
Nice.
I liked it, and I did think I liked seeing these different points of view from the different humans. Leo, the father, is very open to the idea. The child Sophie is extremely open to the idea, and she's still learning about parental roles.
Right, whereas the older
friends.
sister not having
Matilda does not have it. She feels like it squanders her, ability to have a job in the future or have any kind of worth. She's very nihilistic about it, and the wife feels that this beautiful synth is going to take her place as mother and wife. And
yes, and there's the adult module that he was given by the salesman that we haven't seen where that's going to go.
And he did have a bum look right before then. It was funny because to me, when she was in the bag being unzipped at the factory, it looked like a bridal veil to me. And I thought that was an interesting thing to put in there. Am I supposed to look at her in this way now as the new wife and mother?
Now, here's what I'm a little confused about, and I'm hoping they get to more of an explanation about it. Is there no way that William Hurt could get a new, up-to-date synth and still, maybe, download the memories of the daughter. You like put them, like put them on a stick and enter it into the new ones.
Well, I think he's another take on how to view AI and android life, which is he looks at Odie as like his son.
Okay.
He's accustomed to his face. He's grown to love him.
Right.
And I think that's another interesting look on the whole idea.
True. I like the look of this show in that they don't make any effort to make anything else look, whiz-bang futurist. It's very kind of mundane and quotidian. And
we still have like minivans.
Right.
And normal, boring stuff that we have right now.
Yeah, it's not like there's no jetpacks or anything. It's just the synths. Everything else is pretty much the same. And I definitely think the Matilda thing, it's relevant to, a lot of people. I think the millennials, everybody talks about how it's the first generation that doesn't think they're going to have it better than their parents, or they're going to go through college and not expect that there's a job waiting for them the way that previous generations maybe did. And so then, the synths and their effect on the workforce and on productivity or whatever is a nice little metaphor for just the world that people are kind of graduating into now.
There was a line that I really liked in the fake newscast where the man supporting synths said, the reason to make machines look more like humans is to make humans less like machines. And he talks about, what about factory workers? What about maids? We need to go do our own thing. And Matilda says, oh, so we're just going to be fucking poets now? And it's interesting to think about that, feeling like your worthfulness or your worthiness is being taken away by something you created. Not
as
a whole.
And on the one hand, sure, it would be lovely if everybody gets to go run off and be a poet or a sculptor or whatever because these other menial tasks are being handled. But does the economy exist to support that? It's like, okay, great, we send all of our manufacturing jobs overseas, so what do we do now? Gosh, nothing, because there aren't any jobs.
Well, I can certainly see that fear standpoint coming from, like, what do we do when we put them in charge of everything that's important and everything that's, makes our lives run?
Yeah, what happens when Skynet becomes self-aware?
We know what happens. There's so much violence. I wanted to talk about Niska. She was the synth who was
the sex worker.
Yes. And she was like, I won't turn off my pain. I absolutely won't do that. I'm going to make it look like you fucked me. And she's slapping him around. I think she's the most human-like synth so far, or at least the most outwardly human synth.
Well, she and Anita, I'd say, are kind of,
Yeah, she's hiding it, though.
Well, yeah, no, Anita's definitely is DLing it around the family for sure. Again, like I go back to, Rutger Hauer and Blade Runner and the whole more human than human thing, which is not a bad thing. And there's only a certain number of ways to tell this kind of story. And I think this show is going to latch on to something that's going to be unique and different. Until we get there, I'm feeling like, well, this is fine. This is good.
There's things I like. That group of rogue conscious synths.
Right.
I've definitely seen, like I've become self-aware type things, but I like that they're in a band led by one human.
Right. Well, that was the thing. I mean, Blade Runner, they were a band too, but they didn't have like the human leading them and helping them out. But so yeah, it's interesting that he sort of knows how to how to split the difference in terms of, all right, you have to behave like this now because someone else is watching and this is what they're expecting from you.
And he couldn't do it, and he started, it was really good. I really enjoyed this first episode.
No, well, you're making me like it more, I have to say.
I just love the idea of being forced to examine our own humanity and what is human emotion, it asked, and we have to sit there and think about these hard questions. Because we're forced to, at least in this world where there's a threat that we could be supplanted, or what we are now could be supplanted, and it gets very philosophical.
Right. Well, the best science fiction is always about, ultimately, the world that we live in, as seen through a world that we don't. And what questions that raises and how it makes it look at ourselves. So we will continue doing that as Humans continues doing that. And I think Francis and Bibbs will be joining us later, so come back for that.
Yay.
Okay, so quite an interesting chat there from those reviewers regarding the first series of Humans, particularly the first episode. So what would you say is the female reviewers' take on this? Is it how much of what she said reinforces the preferred reading? What aspects did she mention that would be part of that preferred reading? And does the male reviewer actually offer us a negotiated or an oppositional reading of the show? So you'll be able to find other reviews of the show out there. It's always worth reading as many as you can find, and doing a good bit of research, because you'll always find different appeals for different people. And as long as you've got a clear understanding of what the preferred reading of the show is, then you'll understand whether or not people have taken the preferred oppositional or a negotiated reading as well. But that is everything for audiences and humans. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.